Let me go to the current Nationals leader federally, David Littleproud. He's on a listening tour of the country. He joins me from Traralgon in Victoria. Thanks for joining us, David. You must be really concerned when you see what's happening in New Zealand, because as sure as night follows day, if Chris Bowen is the zealot on climate that he reveals himself to be every day, they're going to attack agriculture in the same way here.
Well, they've already signed up to the pledge to reduce methane emissions by 30%. Now, while they're saying that's not binding, you've got to read the fine print of that pledge. Within that, it gives the power of financial institutions to restrict capital or increase the cost of capital to farmers that aren't taking meaningful action. So this will be a tax by stealth if we're not careful, and the moral police of the banks are left to make that decision, which worries me. But let me just say, the gentleman from New Zealand is exactly right. The only way that you can reduce methane emissions is either to pay the tax or reduce your herd size. Now, if you pay the tax, it has to be passed on. If you reduce the herd size, Grade 8 business economics tells you supply goes down, price goes up. And that's what's happened already. Supply's gone down, and for a old T-bone's about $30 a kilogram, and I feel it's about $70 a kilogram. And I made the statement that this will take the barbecue away from many Australians. It'll stop. I was lambasted for it. Well, this is how out of touch Chris Bowen and the Labor Party are, is that the barbecue's already stopped for many Australians. They can't afford $30 a kilo for T-bone because our abattoirs are only working 60% because supply's gone down. So if you add to the cost and you talk about additives, feed supplements, let me tell you, the trials show that they are too expensive, about $2 per head per day. So for a beast that's sitting in a feedlot for 90 days, add another $180 to it. It gets passed on. So if you want to pay for it, it's good. But there's actually some animal welfare issues coming out of these feed additives. So it's just, you don't sign up to something unless you have a solution. And New Zealand's just gone down this crazy path. And Chris Bowen, I suspect, is going to take it.
Well, why don't we get back to basics, though? I mean, what are they trying to deal with here? What are we missing about the natural cycle here? That's been going on, since time immemorial. Animals eat grass, and it makes the animals, and it creates meat and other things that we use. From the animal comes CO2 emissions and methane emissions through their dung and whatever, and into the atmosphere. That fertilises the ground and plants grow again, turning the CO2 into oxygen, and then they get eaten by the animals. That's called nature. Why are we deciding that nature apparently is the enemy now?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. They haven't even worked out the accounting for this, because exactly the cycle you've just eloquently articulated hasn't even been taken into account. I mean, methane's got a shelf life of 12 years, but it is part of a cycle. And when you haven't accounted for that, and you're not going to, you simply want to make one sector pay, and that's the agricultural sector. But it means you're all going to pay. Every time you're at the checkout and you get your grocery bill on that docket, you should see Anthony Albanese's face on it. He's already driving it up by taking away a workforce. He took away the ag visa, so there is no workers. Your groceries are already 8% higher. So you're trying to solve a problem that's not there, and the only way to do it is to tax somebody and pass the cost on. Someone has to pay. That's an old adage that I've been drummed into since a kid. Ultimately, someone always has to pay, and this will be not just farmers, it'll be you. It'll be you at the checkout.
Well, given what they're trying to do in energy to reduce carbon dioxide or greenhouse gas emissions in energy, we all know what that's been doing to our gas prices and our electricity prices as a result. Have a look at Anthony Albanese today. The Prime Minister seems to reckon he's got it all solved.
We confronted, when we came to office, a circumstance where some were saying that the lights wouldn't stay on over June, July. We fixed that. We then confronted a supply issue in gas. We fixed that as well. What we need to do now is to make sure that we address the issue of price. The government has said we're examining all of the options, and we'll continue to do so.
Don't worry, all under control, apparently. Give us your thoughts on that, if you could, David. And also, while you're at it, you're in Traralgon, obviously the Latrobe Valley, big coal area, big power generating area in the past, all shutting down now. Have you sussed out their attitude to nuclear power, whether a place like that would like to host nuclear energy so that it could continue to transmit energy to the state?
Well, that's exactly right, because we need firming power, and this reckless pace that Chris Bowen is going down the renewables path is putting pressure on prices. And I know Anthony Albanese's got an economics degree, but he must have missed the class about supply. Supply hasn't been fixed, and because supply hasn't been fixed with gas, it means that prices are going up because there's not enough supply. And in fact, what they did in this budget was take away grants to actually do more exploration work in the Adavale and Cooper basins to put more supply into the gas, but also they've taken away the investment that we were putting into making sure there wasn't a physical constraint of getting gas south from Queensland in bigger pipelines so that there was no physical constraint in delivery. So the supply hasn't been fixed. And the fact is, Anthony Albanese has demonised the gas companies for the last 9 years. This now is coming home to roost. The gas companies are prepared to put more supply in, and the fact that it is all gone export in the past was in fact Labor's fault. Let me tell you, Kevin Rudd and Peter Beattie, when the exploration of the Surat Basin came on, made sure that all that gas went through an export through Curtis Island because they didn't want it to compete with the coal-fired power stations in Queensland, which the Queensland government owned. They didn't want another domestic source of energy that they'd have to compete with because they were getting $1.5 billion worth of dividends from our coal-fired power station and distribution arm. So the reason we haven't got any gas that's going domestically of any scale is because of Labor's handling on this last time. And now they have this ideological view that they don't like gas. Gas needs to be part of our energy mix. And Chris Bowen is putting all our energy eggs in one basket. And that will not just drive up price, it will tear away reliability. And that's why a mature conversation about bringing the community on the emerging technology of small-scale modular, nuclear technology that we don't have to spend a cent on in trying to develop. We just peek over the Pacific. And we don't have to build billions of dollars of transmission lines to do it. You just put them in where the old coal-fired stations are, and you basically plug them in without having to put more transmission lines. Billions of $20 billion worth of transmission lines. This is just insanity. And someone's going to pay for that. That's going to be on your bill. Half your bill's already for the transmission, the poles and wires. They're not going to gold plate it like Gillard. They're going to platinum plate these transmission lines. And Chris Bowen is just reckless in his arrogance and disregard for the Australian taxpayer and the Australian consumer, because ultimately they're going to pay.
We will all pay. Thanks so much for joining us, David. David Littleproud there, the Nationals leader, joining us from the Latrobe Valley in Victoria.